Hello everyone and welcome to another video on our own devices. I'm Jean Messier and today we're having a look at a fascinating piece of vintage lighting equipment. This is a modern reproduction of a Stonebridge Automatic Folding Lantern. This was developed in the early 20th century and for many decades was very popular among campers, hikers, fishers, scouts, and other outdoor enthusiasts. It was even officially adopted by the armed forces of the United States, Canada, and several other Entente nations and served in large numbers during the First World War. Now, this is a very elegant, robust, and nifty piece of equipment, so let's have a closer look at it. Let me show you where it came from and how it works. Now, as the name implies, the Stonebridge Folding Lantern was the brainchild of one Charles H. Stonebridge, an American inventor and the founder and superintendent of the Stonebridge Folding Lantern Company of New York City. He received his first patent for a folding lantern in November 1900, which was followed by patents for various improvements in September 1903, May 1904, March 1905, November 1906, and June 1908. Now, sometime between 1906 and 1908, the Stonebridge Folding Lantern Company changed its name to the C.H. Stonebridge Manufacturing Company, likely because by this time its product line had expanded beyond folding lanterns to cover other outdoor goods, and all lanterns manufactured after this point will bear that company name. Stonebridge lanterns were offered in three different materials: galvanized steel, brass, and aluminum, the former costing $1.50 and the latter two $2.50, or around $58.97 today. And while opinions varied greatly among outdoor equipment enthusiasts as to whether the brass or the galvanized steel version was better, it was widely accepted that the aluminum version was inferior, since the alloys available at the time were fairly soft and these lanterns were very susceptible to damage. Now, many changes were made to the basic Stonebridge design over its first decade or so of manufacture, but before we go over those, let's have a closer look at this modern reproduction as a point of reference. Fully folded, this lantern measures only 4.5 by 6 by 0.5 inches, or 11.5 by 15 by 1.3 centimeters, easy to slip into a backpack or a large cargo pocket. And on the two chimney panels, you can see stamped the Stonebridge Automatic Folding Lantern, the various relevant patent dates, and Folding Lantern Company, New York City, New York. To open this, we simply lift up on the chimney panels and three hinged window panels fold out to form the main lantern body. Now, while the windows on this reproduction are polycarbonate, in the originals these would have been made of slices of the mineral mica, which is heat resistant, reasonably flexible, and transparent enough for illumination purposes. Now, you will sometimes see this window material referred to as Isinglass, which is technically a completely different material made from the swim bladder of sturgeon and other fish, traditionally used as finings for clarifying wine and beer. However, transparent mica was for a time also known as isinglass due to its broadly similar appearance. And as you can see, these windows are protected from flexing and breaking by these diagonal wires. Once the window panels are unfolded, you can swing down the floor panel, which locks in place on this little spring catch on the front. And inside you can see the hinged wire candle holder, which automatically adjusts to various sizes of candle. Finally, we fold down the roof panel, tent the two chimney panels, and swing down and secure this latch at the front to lock everything in place. At the bottom, we have a set of air intake holes, and at the top, a wire handle or bail for carrying the lantern and a hole at the back for hanging it on a nail. And that's really all there is to it, a very simple and elegant design. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, numerous, often very subtle changes were made to the basic Stonebridge design between 1900 and 1908, and these can be very confusing to keep track of. Now, as I've said in the past, this is not intended to be a collector's channel, and so I typically don't go over every single tiny variation of a particular product or technology. However, this article by Robert Kraft in the Mineralogical Record provides a very handy chart of the Stonebridge lantern's development, so I might as well go over it. Kraft divides the lanterns into 7 main evolutionary stages: early short, intermediate short, late short, early tall, intermediate tall, late tall, and final tall. The very first early short Stonebridge pattern was introduced in 1900 and was considerably different from later models. Measuring around 9 inches tall, it had 4 mica panels instead of the later 3 plus a rear metal reflector, and could only be folded by removing 4 long hinge pins. However, this design proved cumbersome to use and was quickly abandoned. Early short lanterns also had a single-sized candle holder and were stamped with a single patent date, November 27, 1900. In 1905, the early short pattern was replaced by the intermediate short, which replaced the original removable hinge pins with permanent hinges. These were far quicker and easier to fold and unfold, and thus became known as automatic lanterns. Other changes to this model included the replacement of one Mica window by a metal reflector, a spring-loaded floor plate that swung automatically into place, 2 to 6 wire protectors for the Mica windows, and a roof plate that was held in place by spring tension. Intermediate short lanterns were stamped with 4 dates: November 1900, September 1903, May 1904, and March 1905. In 1906, the intermediate short pattern was slightly updated to produce the late short pattern. These lanterns incorporated a wire latch to lock the roof and chimney plates, eliminated the spring-loaded floor plate, and added an extra nail-hanging notch to the bail, extra ventilation holes at the bottom, and an extra sheet of mica in front of the reflector, though not on aluminum models. Intermediate short lanterns had 2 window protection wires and were stamped with 5 dates: November 1900, September 1903, May 1904, March 1905, and November 1906. From 1906 onward, the height of Stonebridge lanterns was increased to 10 inches in an attempt to overcome a common problem with all these lanterns: overheating. The first early tall pattern also introduced a larger 2-size candle holder and had 3 window protection wires. The next intermediate tall pattern differed only in the addition of even more ventilation holes. As previously mentioned, in 1908, the Stonebridge Folding Lantern Company changed its name to the C.H. Stonebridge Manufacturing Company. It also dropped automatic from the name of its folding lanterns. These late tall pattern lanterns also featured even more ventilation holes, as well as sliding ventilation adjustment covers, and, likely to simplify stamping, were only marked with 2 patent dates: November 1906 and June 1908. Finally, the last final tall pattern produced after 1908 added even more side ventilation holes, a raised perforated floor plate to further increase ventilation, and spring-loaded triangular windshields or baffles in the chimney. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, which historic model does this replica represent? Well, as it turns out, none of them. The overall dimensions, snap closure, 5 patent dates, and nail notch on the bail most closely match the late short pattern, but the originals had only 2 protection wires on the windows, while this one has 3. It also has a later pattern 2-size candle holder. In producing this replica, the manufacturer apparently decided to add a number of anachronistic but still very useful features, which, fair enough. Now, despite the numerous advantages of this design, it still suffers from a number of shortcomings. For example, as I mentioned, these have a tendency to overheat such that they are impossible to hold safely by any other part than the wire bail. The mica panels are also attached in such a fashion that they are very difficult to replace if they get damaged, though the Stonebridge Folding Lantern Company, and later manufacturing company, did offer spare mica panels for 10 cents a piece. And finally, these low-mounted ventilation holes, especially in later models, tended to drip wax. However, none of this really affected these lanterns' commercial success. Immediately upon their introduction, Stonebridge lanterns were widely praised and promoted by outdoors writers like Edward Breck, Francis Buzzacott, Horace Kephart, Calvin Rustrum, and Stuart Edward White. As a result, they became extremely popular with campers, scouts, and other outdoor enthusiasts, and were sold not only by Stonebridge Folding Lantern or Manufacturing Company, but also a number of other outfitters and retailers, including Abercrombie & Fitch. Even more notably, these lanterns were officially adopted by the U.S. military, specifically the U.S. Army Medical Corps and the Commissary Corps, as well as Canada and several other Entente nations, and served in large numbers during the First World War. Many of these lanterns are stamped with a caduceus symbol or the crest of the Commissary Corps, though the lack of these symbols does not rule out military use. Now, while the Stonebridge was by far the most famous and popular folding candle lantern of its era, it was far from the only one. Other popular designs of the time include the Italian Excelsior Lux, the French Army M1910 and its German Austro-Hungarian copy, and the Swiss Army Folding Lantern, which was based on the Excelsior Lux and issued from the 1920s all the way to the 1980s for emergency lighting, though all these are beyond the scope of this video. And that, dear viewers, is everything you ever want to know about the Stonebridge Folding Lantern, but were afraid to ask. Despite its age, this is still a very clever, robust, elegant piece of kit that's just as useful in a hiking backpack or an emergency kit as it was 126 years ago. Now, thank you so much for watching. I did manage to find a bit more time this holiday season to put out 2 extra videos, and I'm looking forward to a whole new year where I will bring you even more fascinating devices from the past. Until then, I'm Jean Nessier from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.